Do you have any members interested to declare?
Chair, I'm a member of Wingleworth Parish Council, so I shall withdraw for item 6.
Thank you. We now move to our meeting held on Tuesday, the 25th of July, with regard to the minutes of the last meeting. Are we happy they are a correct record? Is there a mover? Seconder? All those in favour? Any abstentions? The motion is carried. Right, thank you, colleagues. That brings us to the main business of the meeting, our 3 applications. Before we start, I would like the clerk to explain, for the benefit of members, speakers, and those watching on YouTube, how we will deal with them.
Thank you, Chair. This is the procedure for considering the business this afternoon. The Chair will introduce an application, then ask the planning officers to refer members to any late comments or updates received since the agenda was issued. These have been published on the Council's website and hard copies have been circulated to you. After this, the Chair will ask any speakers to address the meeting. There will be speakers on the first and second applications. Speakers will have 3 minutes to put forward their views. There will be a reminder given by the clerk when 30 seconds remain. At the end of the 3 minutes, members of the committee will have an opportunity to ask the speaker questions, if necessary, to clarify any points they have made. After the speaker has addressed the committee and answered any questions, then they will be allowed to remain in the meeting, but they will not be allowed to participate further from this point. The Chair will then open up the meeting for questions to officers, a debate by the committee, and finally determination on the application by a vote. The votes will be taken by roll call. Finally, members, this meeting is being live streamed and recording will be placed on the Council's website. Please note that others may choose to copy this recording. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Let's move on to the first application, NED 22/00686/FL Drumfield. In line with our normal practices, I'm going to ask the planning officer to tell us about any late comments and to give a brief presentation showing any photos and plans of the site. I will allow the officers to complete their presentation. Consequently, members, unless you have a point of order that you feel cannot wait, could you please reserve these or any questions about the process until the end? All right, thank you. I'll pass over to Alice Lockett, who's doing our first presentation today.
Thank you, Chair. The first item is full planning application for the development of 27 new dwellings, a sports pavilion and associated access at land off Oak Hill Road, Drumfield. This is a major development and we have had to amend the title and had amended drawings during the application process. The late representations were sent to you yesterday. I do have a slight update on boundary treatments, which I'll cover in my presentation, if that's okay, Chair. The site outlined here in orange is located within the settlement development limits for Drumfield, which is a level 1 town and therefore considered one of the most sustainable settlements in the district. The site is not otherwise allocated in the local plan for development. The site formerly housed the Gladys Buxton Adult Education Centre, which was demolished in 2019. It is bounded by the doctor's surgery near the entrance, dwellings on Oak Hill Road back onto the site to the north, and to the south and east is a playing field. You can also see the rectangular paved area to the south, which serves as a parking for the playing fields. This is not located within the application site. It is considered that this area could accommodate at least 75 cars. This is the red line plan for the application site. Part of the site shown here, Hatch Brown, is included in the Brownfield Register and is therefore considered suitable for redevelopment. The remainder of the site is designated as sports facilities, shown here in green. The surrounding sports pitches provide one adult and one youth football pitch. This area is protected by local and national policy, which seeks to protect and enhance all existing sports and recreation facilities. Sport England originally objected to the loss of the designated area within the Red Line and the changing rooms. After some research and discussion, Sport England has accepted that the former tennis court to the south of the application site has been in use as a car park for over 20 years and would be sufficient to serve the remaining playing fields. To mitigate the loss of the other areas of the sports site and the changing facilities, the applicant has agreed to include a two-team changing pavilion in the scheme. The management of this building will be secured as part of the Section 106 legal agreement. As a consequence, Sport England have removed their objection. Officers are therefore of the view that the principle of development on this site is acceptable. After negotiation with officers, the layout has been adjusted to meet many of the criteria of good design outlined in Successful Places. It features outward-facing design, terminating views and sufficient parking, mostly located to the side or rear of the properties. A mixture of 2, 3 and 4 bed houses are proposed, of designs based on standard house types. Interest is created by a varied use of materials and fenestration details. After having questions from neighbours about the boundary between the site and the rear gardens of Oak Hill Road, I have sought clarity from the agent, who informed me yesterday that the vegetation on this boundary will be cut back and a 1.8 metre high fence installed. Officers are of the understanding that the trees shown in the drawing will be retained. If members are minded to approve the application, officers have recommended a condition to provide further details on boundary treatment, as well as a landscaping scheme which includes tree protection measures. The following slides show the house types. So I'm just going to go through these quite quickly. That's a 3-bed semi-detached, another 3-bed semi-detached, a 3-bed semi-detached with a garage, 2-bed semi-detached. Sorry, too many pieces of paper. A 4-bed detached, unit, and is located at the centre of the site. And most of the site, the plots also have garages, either single or double, or groups of garages. This photo is taken from the southeast. The application site is the raised area to the right of the picture, with the existing adjoining doctor's surgery in the background. The sports pavilion will be located approximately where the trees in the centre of this photo stand. This photo is taken from within the site. The photo shows that the adjoining properties on Oak Hill Road to the north are located at a higher elevation than the application site. The levels of elevation decrease from east to west. This is a view of the northeastern end of the site from the playing fields. This is the centre of the site from the playing fields. You can see the existing boundary features with the dwellings on Oak Hill Road, and the view from the former tennis courts parking area to the site of the proposed pavilion. Overall, and on balance, officers consider that the proposal of this design and layout in a sustainable location is acceptable, and are therefore recommending approval subject to conditions and the completion of a full Section 106 agreement. The legal agreement will include, but is not limited to, provision of affordable housing, management of the sports pavilion and biodiversity net gain provision. And that's everything. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alice. Right, colleagues, we have 3 speakers on the application. The first of whom is Elizabeth Ranson, an objector. They will each have 3 minutes to get over their points and will be informed when they have 30 seconds remain. As members, you can ask to clarify any matters that have been raised, but remember your questions should only relate to the points which they have already made. Can we have the first speaker, please? Yeah, no problem with that. So it's Paul Ranson. Thank you. Yeah, That's no problem. So you've got 3 minutes, Paul, if you understood that. And
Merville, thank you. So we just wanted to raise a couple of important questions really regarding the proposed development of the Gladys Buxton site. Firstly, regarding the Coal Authority's comments of the risk of gas emissions, just stating that the local planning authorities should seek their own technical advice on the gas hazards that may exist and appropriate measures be implemented from technically competent personnel. Can we have assurances that this will be the case and that we as interested parties will be able to view any reports in a transparent and open way, such as email notification when a report is submitted to planning officials or the council? And secondly, can I ask that the remediation and mitigation measures regarding land stability are also made available to interested parties so that we can ensure there are no negative impacts to surrounding houses? And then my final note would be to draw attention really to the committee and the councillors that the current state of the playing fields is not fit for purpose and they need considerable work. So the provision of a sports pavilion would increase the use of this area for sport and exercise, which would be a positive thing. However, as others have commented, I think in the comments, only if we have assurances that the necessary work will be done to address the state of the playing fields area, safe provision of parking, as well as the ongoing maintenance and monitoring of this area as a community asset.
thank you.
Thank you.
Do any members have any questions? Councillor Cooper.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Just on the state of the actual football fields, how many is there, just to clarify?
There's actually 3 pitches, but I believe it was in the comments it was 1 adult and 1 junior. But I mean, we both run regularly in the area. We'd never run on that field. It's not safe. It's there's the state of the fields now is just it's not fit for it.
Okay, and how often is it used? And are the teams actually who are playing on there? I presume there are teams. Are they part of leagues?
There aren't any teams playing on there that I'm aware of. No, not for many years. Basically, I think the grass has just been cut. It was wild and overgrown. If you look at the goalposts, they're rusted and have just been left for years. So I don't believe there's been any maintenance to that site for a long time, really, in terms of football pitches.
And who actually maintains that sports area?
Well, I assume it was Derbyshire County Council or Drumfield Town Council, but I'm not actually aware of who's responsible for it, to be honest. It used to be maintained, and for a number of years after the school was demolished and the education centre was there, they were maintained to a decent level, and you did have teams training on them.
Okay, thanks very much.
Nobody else? Right, okay, thank you. You can take your seat again. Now call Elizabeth Branson. Thank you, whenever you're ready.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm pleased to see in the revised plan that the trees, hedgerows and vegetation around the edge are remaining, as these have been there for many years and would seriously impact the wildlife and well-being of people who live on the road if they were removed. But I'm just worried about, well, what sort of assurance and legal requirement will take place to ensure that building contractors don't damage trees or remove vegetation, which will disturb wildlife and nesting birds during the building work. The plans describe and justify the interaction to the existing houses in section 2.4 in the revised planning statement as the site being in quotation, separated by a steep embankment which leads up from the site to the rear gardens of the properties along Oak Hill Road. In most instances, the back gardens are defined by a significant level of trees and vegetation, which physically separates the site from the rear gardens of the adjoining houses, end of quotations. It is correct in most instances that the back gardens do have trees and vegetation separating them from the proposed site. However, not all the houses have a steep bank, as you said earlier. It does taper off on one side, so it's not much of a steep bank. There is a bit of a bank, but it's not. I wouldn't describe it as a steep bank there. And my interest is plot 16 looks very close to the end of our garden and next door, and seems to have an open boundary. So I'm concerned, a couple of things that concern me about plot 16 in particular on the new design is it's going to impinge on our privacy and possibly light due to the elevation and design of the planned house. That's one of the larger ones in relation to our garden and house. So because the boundary is open, I'm concerned that the existing vegetation won't be protected as stated in the plan. Because so that was my comments really about it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions? No, you can take back to your seat then, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. We now have Tom Bryslin, who is the agent. If you'd like to take your seat, please. Thank you. Whenever you're ready.
Thanks, Chair, and good afternoon all. I'm Tom Breeslin from Urbana Sound Planning, the agent for this application. I'd like to begin by reflecting on what's been a very thorough and highly collaborative application process. The scheme before you today is the product of significant engagement with the Council's planning team and consultees. To get to this point of an officer recommendation for approval is a significant achievement and to the credit of both the applicant and your officers who have been cooperative and robust throughout. It's the firm belief of the applicant that this scheme represents the best outcome for the site and locality, bringing forward a development on brownfield land of a suitable density, providing much needed new homes to respond to acute local need. The proposal is fully affordable housing policy compliant, with the affordable units to be provided as affordable rented, as requested by the local authorities housing team. The applicant is also committed to meet the full complement of Section 106 requirements. The provision of a brand new sports pavilion with changing and shower facilities for use by local sports teams will anchor the development in the community and provide a significant new community asset that will enable the continued development of local talent and drive sports participation. Through cooperation with your officers, this scheme has also been significantly reduced from an originally proposed 35 units to the 27 unit schemes you see before you today. This process of iterative redesign has resulted in a scheme which has achieved the best possible layout, with homes that interact with the open space and each other according to the principles outlined within the Council's SPG on successful places. From a highways perspective, the transport assessment has demonstrated to the satisfaction of the highways officer how the busy times of use for the various different users of the site that share the access will fundamentally not clash, with the proposed development most concentrated trips during the working hours of the week, and the sports pitches and changing facilities generating their most concentrated trips on weekends. Therefore, the highways officer is satisfied that the users combined will not overwhelm the junction with Oak Hill Road. The applicant is currently finalising biodiversity net gain arrangements whilst on-site biodiversity net gain isn't feasible despite extensive landscaping and tree retention efforts. An off-site solution at Frithwood is being explored upon Derbyshire County Council's guidance. The applicant is committed to off-site biodiversity, given the context of a nationwide housing crisis that is felt particularly acutely in Dronfield, preventing many from accessing sustainable
30 seconds left.
Particularly the young families in need of affordable rent. The positive contribution that this fully affordable housing policy compliant proposal will have in this regard cannot be understated. I therefore thank your officers again for working with us to ensure the quality and thoroughness of the scheme, and I strongly urge members to support the recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any members have any questions or points of clarity for the agent? Councillor Cooper.
I have some concerns about the new sports pavilion. From what I've heard earlier, there's no teams actually based on that site because the pitches are just not of a fit state to be able to play football or other sports on, by the sound of it. I mean, they've even, the two earlier speakers have described the fact that they don't even run on there because it's not fit for that. Do you propose to do any work to them sports facilities? You talk about encouraging sport, which I fully endorse. You talk about talent, I fully endorse all that. But without the actual facilities and the teams, there's no future there, and you've got a building that could effectively become a real problem to that area. It needs some ownership, and it needs some sort of thinking about, I think, before we put a sports pavilion up, changing facility, call it what you will, without the necessary main thing in order, i.e. the playing fields, and the fact that people will use it as it's meant to be used for, and take some responsibility on for that building. And what's more, then we need to be assured about the ownership of that building.
So as Alice mentioned, the ownership will be secured as part of the Section 106. The applicant's currently in discussions with Derbyshire County Council, who they're the owner of the sports pitch adjacent to our site. So that's not actually within our site boundary. But the ongoing discussions that will be secured through the Section 106 between the agent and Derbyshire County Council will essentially work out who will be responsible for the maintenance of the sports pavilion. The pitches aren't within the site boundary. The reason for the sports pavilion was a Sport England objection. In order to remove the Sport England objection, they requested the provision of the equivalent facilities that were lost when the school was demolished in 2019. So that's the reason for the provision of the sports pavilion, and maintenance will be discussed as part of the Section 106 discussions with Derbyshire County Council.
Councillor Liggett.
Thank you. It's probably more appropriate actually to ask Alice, but I'll ask anyway, because I've been told today that Derbyshire County Council have categorically said they do not want ownership of that sports pavilion. So basically a sports pavilion is being built with no owners and nobody to run it. Thank you.
No more questions? Right, thank you. You can.
Yeah, I think as I say, the reason for the pavilion being there was the Sport England objection. The discussions that the applicant is having and will be sort of confirmed with tied into the Section 106. It's not necessarily for Derbyshire County Council to take over ownership. It's to find out who will own it. You know, it's a discussion that's ongoing. I'm not aware that there's been a confirmation or finalisation, as you say at the moment, but it will have to be worked out as part of the Section 106 that this application is hinging upon, essentially.
Thank you. Right, right, colleagues. We'll now move on to the questions for officers, which I'm sure that will be one of them. As always, I would like to keep this part of the proceedings focused on getting clarity about any points you are not sure of. Once we have done this, we can then have our discussion about the application based on all that we have heard and read. Councillor Liggett.
Thank you. Thank you. Can I please have my comments minuted, because it concerns me greatly, this, because I can just see this building becoming an antisocial hotspot, shall we call it? Because as it is at the moment, they're putting a building up and there's absolutely nobody. There's no team, there's no committees. there's not the county council, there's nobody to run it. So basically, there's just going to be a white elephant building in a muddy field.
So was there a question there?
Yes, can Alice change my mind on this comment?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Liggett. If members are minded to grant permission today, it will be subject to the Section 106 agreement. So if agreement can't be made about the management of the sports pavilion, then the permission won't exist. So in my view, that is we won't end up with a white elephant, because we have to get that sorted out before the decision can be, before the development can go ahead.
Just if I can add to that, Chair, that as Alice says, the recommendation before you is to grant permission subject to that 106 agreement, for which this would form a part. So if that wasn't achieved, we would need to find a way of addressing that, and that may be bringing the matter back to yourselves, because without the pavilion provision, that additional offsetting facility, the comments and concerns of Sport England may become relevant again. So we would have to find a way through that if we couldn't achieve that through the 106 agreement.
Thank you for clarifying that. Any further questions from officers? Councillor Cooper.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for clarifying that, because that is a definite point of a concern for myself as well. My next question is regarding the comments made by Mrs. Ranson regarding the boundary treatment at 16. Can you just clarify what the situation is there, please?
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Yeah, plot 16 is slightly closer to the boundary than we would normally expect from the guidance from Successful Places. However, the way that the house has been designed, there are no overlooking first floor windows that are within 10.5 metres of the boundary. And as I pointed out in my presentation earlier, there is actually going to be a fence along that boundary, so any sort of ground floor windows will be blocked by that. So we are of the view that although it's not 100% meeting Successful Places, the applicants have through the design have addressed the concerns. So we're of the view that it is therefore acceptable.
Thank you. Any more questions for officers? Councillor Cooper.
Just a couple. Just going back to the changing facility, I just want to clarify, because obviously not knowing the site, is there access to the changing facility from the existing car park, and also is there access onto the actual playing fields from the changing facility without actually going back onto the car park? Is that attainable? So what I wouldn't want to see is children particularly, running back down over the car park, potentially with cars manoeuvring, parking, etc.
Would it be helpful if I showed you the drawing again?
Yeah, if you can bring that up again, please.
Just have to zip back through. Okay, so the changing pavilion will be there at the bottom. Have I shared that properly? Okay, yeah, it's the long building at the bottom of the site. The area that can be used as car park is this whole area of former tennis courts. It's a really large area. I think it's something like 90 metres long by about 30 metres wide. So as you can see, there is access to it from the pavilion. Access across to the playing field, which are sort of to the east, is not without going across that piece of land, but I can't see why it wouldn't be possible to manage it in such a way that you wouldn't have cars along that top boundary. At the minute, this is not laid out with any parking. It's not got like parking lines or anything. But I can't see why there wouldn't be a possibility for that to happen and for it to be able to be managed in a reasonable way.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper.
Could that form part of the condition if subject to the 106 going through? Could that form part of the condition that we make some access?
It's not in there. No, it's not within the red line of the application.
Right.
So I'm
Okay.
afraid it couldn't. I don't think.
The only suggestion I've got, Chair, is if that were of particular concern to members, that potentially something that could be included in the management of the pavilion and be included in a 106 agreement. I think that would be my suggested way forward, if that was a particular concern to you.
It is a concern because it's an health and safety issue as far as I'm concerned. I wouldn't want people running back onto that area. Obviously, there's a green are within the boundary. Is there no way that could be used as part of it?
There are two ways, Chair, that if the planning committee are concerned about that and would wish to grant permission subject to that, is to either impose a condition requiring some walkway from the pavilion that avoids the car park, or as I say, include it in the management agreement. And I'm sure one of those would be appropriate, and I think would be covered by the recommendation before you. As officers, we would note that point and address it either by way of condition or through the 106 agreement to ensure that there is access from the new pavilion building to the playing fields that doesn't need to go through areas where cars are parked. I think that encapsulates what your concern is, Councillor Cooper.
Councillor Liggett.
Yeah, Adrian, I'm just still a little confused. If this is the management of this pavilion is part of the 106 agreement and there is no management, how do we move forward?
Alice has been in discussions with various bodies. I apologise, Alice, I don't know the exact people who you've been talking to, but we are aware that there is certainly advised to us, not in writing, but in verbal form, a latent demand for an area such as this for the use by sports teams within Dronfield. And as Mr. Breislin said to you, that doesn't necessarily mean that the county council need to take the building on. It could be another, but that would be something that would be addressed through completion of the 106 agreement. So there would be some ownership of the building achieved through that, and then that would be ongoing thereafter. The issue that we've had as planners is that there was again, as Mr. Breislin and Alice have both mentioned, there was a objection from Sport England, which in effect was something that had to be addressed by the applicant and the local planning authority in conjunction to move forwards. And as officers, we've secured what is deemed to be an appropriate mitigating provision, because the change of facilities used to be within the adult education centre, and they were lost when the building was lost. So in effect, to promote the reuse of the playing area, and I note what's been said to you by speakers and by Councillor Cooper, that the facilities as they are maybe need some work on them, but to secure the long-term use of the playing facilities, a changing area was something that I think it was the FA and the Football Foundation required, and this is the solution that's been found. And as planning authority, we believe that this meets your policy objectives with regard to the retention of a sports pitches, which is designated in your local plan. This is one of those, and it's the outcome that we as planning officers feel happy with, and we can recommend to you approval of the scheme subject to the provision of this. As we keep on going back to, the management and ownership of that facility doesn't need to be the county council or necessarily a council. It could be a private body or a football club, for example, but that would be addressed through the Section 106 agreement.
No more questions for officers? Right, thank you for that, officers. This leads us to the final part of the process, our discussion about what we've heard, what we think and what we want to decide. But before we go any further, I would like the clerk to remind us about motions.
Thank you, Chair. Please bear in mind, members, that a motion must be moved and seconded before a vote is taken. If an amendment to a motion is moved and seconded, then that amendment will be voted on first. If a motion is to be moved which goes against the officer's recommendations, then the member who has moved the motion must give the reasons for doing so. The reason for moving a motion against officer recommendations should comprise the relevant planning issues and be supported by evidence as necessary. If a motion to reject officer recommendations falls, or in other words, it is not passed, that doesn't mean that the recommendations are automatically approved. Rather, you will need to take a positive decision through a further motion in favour of the recommendation to be approved by the committee through another vote. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Alan. Right, I would like to open the floor for debate. Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I've been on here a long time, and I think this is probably the only application I've seen in years that actually has the housing supportive. I think it's a little bit worrying that Sport England have put this condition on that we've got to meet in there, but I agree with the work. I think Alice has done a sterling job in actually getting that sorted. My only concern with it is the plot 16 issue, but again, it seems as though everything that can be done to mitigate it has been done, so I'm quite supportive of this one.
Thank you. Councillor Leggett.
Yeah, I'm just going to agree. I mean, I'm quite happy about the proposal. It's just that I do think it's irresponsible to put a building up with no management already, you know, wanting it, as it were, because I'm just very, very concerned that that sports pavilion could end up as, like I say, a antisocial behaviour area.
Adrian, would you like to say
just trying to reassure members on this point, Chair, that planning permission won't be granted. If you are minded to resolve this afternoon to grant permission, it won't be granted unless a Section 106 agreement that secures the ongoing management of the building has been secured. And as I said earlier, Chair, if the resolution is based on that and that's not addressed and secured, we would need to find a way of moving forward, and that may mean coming back to yourselves for a reassessment of the application and all that entails, because there is the Sporting England issue. So as best I can, Chair, I'm trying to reassure members that there won't be a building constructed without that being secured.
Thank you for clarifying that, Adrian. Any other comments? Anybody else? No. Right, thank you, colleagues. Having heard everything today and the officer recommendations before us, what is the view of the committee on the application? I am now opening the floor to motions.
I'm happy to move that we accept officer recommendations, Chair.
Second that, Chair.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Rouse. Right, I'll take a vote on that. I'm going to have a show of hands, please. What about accepting officer recommendations? Yep.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Yep. Sorry, if you would like to leave now, and we need to bring some more people in for the next debate. Thank you. Thank you for your participation. Thanks. It's just going to take a few minutes while I bring the, there's quite a few speakers on the next item, so we need to bring those into the chamber. Right, we now move on to the second application, which is NED 23/00610/FL Culthorpe. I'm going to ask the planning officers to tell us about any late comments and to give a brief presentation showing any photos and plans of the site. I will allow the officers to you feel confident about the process until the end. Thank you. I'll now pass you over to Alice again, who is going to do the second presentation. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. This application is for temporary planning permission for siting of a mobile farm shop and cafe, creation of new access and parking at land to the west side of Cutthorpe Institute, Main Road, Cutthorpe. The late reps were sent to you yesterday, but we have just at 12:05 this afternoon received comments from Highways, which in summary have no objection subject to conditions with regard to parking, visibility displays and pedestrian visibility displays. The application site is shown here in orange. The site is located outside of the settlement development limits and is therefore in the North East Derbyshire Greenbelt. The site is also within the primary area of multiple environmental sensitivity, or the AIMS, and this is therefore considered to be in part of the district's most valued landscapes. In the Greenbelt, inappropriate development should not be approved except in very special circumstances. The construction of new buildings is regarded as inappropriate development with some exceptions. Agricultural buildings are considered an exception. However, officers are of the view that as the building will not be used for an agricultural purpose, is located well away from the other buildings constituting the primary farm group, and the works required to establish it are considerable and permanent in character, and as such it cannot be classed as either an agricultural building or a temporary structure ancillary to the farm operation. As a consequence, the proposal does not meet any of the exceptions. The location plan is outlined here in red. The block plan shows the building located approximately 30 metres from the Institute, with a car parking area for 10 cars laid to hard standing in between. A new access within the existing dry stone wall will be created to Main Road. Engineering works, such as to form a car park, may be acceptable in the Greenbelt, provided they preserve the openness of the Greenbelt and do not conflict with its purposes. Officers are of the view that such an area of hard standing and wide access point would both individually and collectively fail to preserve the spatial and visual openness and would have an urbanising impact on the Greenbelt. As a whole, officers consider the proposals to harm the Greenbelt, and therefore it requires very special circumstances for its approval. The building proposed is a modular building which has the character of a mobile home. Officers consider that it fails to meet the high standard of design required by the Council's countryside landscape and design policies and would be harmful to the valued landscape. The following photos are a selection from yesterday's site visit. The site is currently an open arable field. There are no existing buildings within the field. The site forms the setting of the coronation tree seen here in the foreground. This is a locally important green space as identified in the emerging neighbourhood plan. You can see that the site will be clearly visible from the green space. The Cutthorpe Conservation Area and Cutthorpe Hall, a Grade 2 listed building, can be seen in the distance in these photos. In this photo. When viewed from the settlement, the field as a whole provides an attractive setting to the edge of the village, and when looking towards the conservation area, officers consider it to have an urbanising impact on the views into the conservation area. This is a view looking back towards from the west. Officers consider that the proposal would represent inappropriate development, which would by definition harm the Greenbelt. It is also considered that due to the design and siting of the building and parking, design and siting, the building and parking would harm the character of the valued landscape. The applicants and supporters have put forward what they consider to be very special circumstances, including the need for a local shop in the village. However, officers are of the view that they hold little weight, as they are in most instances unsubstantiated and in any case do not outweigh the significant harm identified. Added to this, it is considered that the design and siting of the building and associated development is not informed by or sympathetic to the distinctive landscape character or primary area of multiple environmental sensitivity. It would also impact dry stone wall and a green space, and would therefore fail to meet national, local and emerging neighbourhood plan policy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alice. Right, colleagues, we have 11 speakers now on this application. The first of whom is Andrew Errington, an objector. They will each have 3 minutes to get over their points, and they will be informed when they have 30 seconds left. You can ask them to clarify matters that have been raised, but remember your questions should relate to the points which they have already made. Right, I'll pass you over to the first speaker who's joining us by Teams, I believe, Andrew Errington.
Thank you.
Hey there, Andrew.
Hello, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. You've got 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today. I, like several others, am opposed to the application, and I hope you will support your planning officer who has recommended refusal on planning grounds. Cutthorpe is a ribbon development on the edge of Britain's first national park, and the proposed neighbourhood plan of Brampton Parish Council, if adopted, will, and I quote, ensure any new development requires no intrusion into the green belt and respects distinctive character, individuality and setting in open countryside. This development clearly does not meet that test. Support for this application is considerable, if largely unfocused. Some support is from non-residents. Many of these responses can be paraphrased as a good idea and deserving to succeed, but without planning merit. Supporters are making much of a need for the cafe and farm shop in the village, perhaps forgetting the lateral spread of Cutthorpe over a 3-mile stretch of road. To many residents, this shop and cafe will never be local. Also forgotten is the fact that there was at one time a corner shop, a butcher shop and a post office in the village, all of which are no more. And can I mention here that what I believe is the caravan that will be used as the shop stroke cafe has been delivered to the Woods Farm. It could be that applicants have already taken your approval for granted. Thank you for listening to me today. I hope you will make your decision solely on the planning aspects of the application and nothing else. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Errington. Have any members got any questions about the points the speaker has raised? Nope. Right, we'll move straight on to the second speaker, which is Elizabeth Wood, the applicant. You have 3 minutes. If you press the microphone on, I think. Yeah, thank you.
Dear Chairman and Committee, I've lived in Cutthorpe on our dairy farm for all my life. Also, I've got a food science and nutrition degree. As one of the applicants, I'm deeply saddened to see that the new jobs that are being provided by the farm shop and cafe and the same job that I'm currently doing are seen as low skilled, which I believe is not the case. There are many skills needed to provide the high level of food safety and customer service which we are intending to provide at the farm shop. As well as this, we are wanting our staff to be able to complete many jobs, not just cooking or waitressing. We are hoping that they will be able to pasteurise in the dairy on the farm, as well as make the ice cream and other dairy products, including yoghurt and cheese, which we are hoping to sell. I don't know about you, but I won't want someone low skilled producing the food I'm going to eat. The employment of locals will mean that they can socialise with the other people in the village, meaning that there is a homely feel, which we hope to portray. The local hub that we are wanting to provide to the village is a much needed necessity that the upcoming neighbourhood plan mentions. A village shop is second on the villagers list and the cafe is fourth. This cements the fact that the village wants it, with even our objectors saying they would still use it. If this was placed at the farm, it would alienate a lot of the elderly residents who are unable to drive or have mobility issues, meaning the endeavour would not be successful. Leading on from this, the shop will not only provide us with another place to sell our farm produce, but also products from surrounding farmers, meaning we can source around 80% of our produce from locals. We already have a vending machine selling our pasteurised milk on the farm. However, we have had people contact us saying that it should be in a central village location that is easier to get to. As well as this, we've had complaints stating that it's dangerous with the constant farm traffic. This provides reasoning why the farm shop on the farm would be unsuitable, as it is hard to get to and people would not want to walk that distance with all the shopping.
All the shopping?
The long farm lane that is needed to get down is a single track that is also a bridleway and footpath, meaning that the increased traffic volume will become a danger to them. I urge you, the committee, to consider the points I have raised and approve the application to create a village farm shop and cafe for the locals to use together with the car park for customers and the institute users. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any members have any questions about the points that have been raised? Yes, Terry, go ahead.
So with the building, it's currently open plan. So if the farm shop's more viable, we'll extend it further into the room, and if the cafe is more viable, we'll extend that. So it depends what's best for the village.
Councillor Cooper.
No.
It's already been sorted. Thank you. No further questions. You can retake your seat. Thank you. The third speaker we have is also the applicant, Matthew Langley. Right then, Matthew, you have 3 minutes whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Dear Chairman and Committee, I am Matthew, one of the applicants, a member of the Chartered Institute of Management Accountants. I'm here today to talk about the unit itself and the temporary nature of this. We applied for a 3-year temporary permission with the view to prove the viability to the community without them committing to a permanent endeavour on the site. Therefore, we believe that during the 3 years, we can prove that the land is more viable to the community as a farm, shop and cafe than as the corner of the field. The proposed site currently takes up 0.5% of the total field volume. The wildflower meadow, which we've given up, takes up significantly more than this. The whole building has been designed and approved to British standards as a caravan to allow it to be reinstated as a field in a matter of hours if the farm shop proves unsuccessful. The unit itself is comprised of 2 sections, which, yes, have already been delivered, both on wheeled steel chassis, and they've got a tow hitch at the front and can be towed by 4x4s, which is the way they ended up getting put where they are. They are joined together by 12 bolts and remain on wheels and axle stands one-sided. The units are cladded externally with a composite dark wood cladding and grey window surrounds, all in aid to reduce the impact and ensure it remains looking like a farm building. The units are well insulated and equipped with air-to-air heat pumps for energy efficiency. Wastewater is collected in a tank to be pumped away, and a temporary electrical collection has already been quoted for by the National Grid with the view of it being disconnected and decommissioned at the end of the 3 years. The car park is a crushed stone layer placed on a membrane. This will ensure that no impact to the road parking is created, and will also aim to improve parking in the local village by allowing the village institute users who currently do not have a car park somewhere to park safely so they're not blocking the bend. This application was strongly supported by the Institute Management Committee for use of the car park and has also been supported by the Parish Council. At the end of the 3 years, the car park will be removed in a matter of hours, not days, with our standard farm machinery. The dry stone wall will be rebuilt by the farm's dry stone waller, and there'll be no evidence of the shop ever being there. Should the project fail, the shop can be fully removed and the green belt reinstated. Therefore, there's no lasting harm to the green belt. We believe that the temporary permission will allow us to prove the viability and sustainability and diversification of the farm. As farmers, we're always being told to diversify. That's exactly what we're trying to do with this application. When looking to diversify, we set out to engage with local residents by holding a stall at the village event and talking to lots of groups to find out what was required from the village and where they wanted and required by most Cutthorpe residents. We're humbled by the support we've received from the village, and we strongly hope you consider supporting the farm and the village with this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any members have any questions about the points that Nope. Right, we'll move on to the next speaker. which is the agent Dominic Cooney. Thank you, Dominic. You've got 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Dominic Cooney, a chartered town planner working for Bagshaws, and I'm speaking as the agent for the application. We are disappointed to see the recommendation for refusal. The applicants have proposed in this application a farm shop with the lowest impact possible, using a mobile building and a temporary permission that is easily reversible. I'd like to draw the committee's attention to the key aspects of this application, the reversibility of what is proposed here. The officer's report is somewhat misleading in this respect, but the simple facts are as follows. The building meets the definition of a caravan and can be installed or removed in a day. The parking area will be crushed stone, laid on a geotextile membrane so that it is entirely reversible. And dry stone walls are easy to dismantle and rebuild at any time. Indeed, this goes on all the time on farms across the land. The location for this building is not in any area identified as a distinctive view in the neighbourhood plan. And I feel that the officer's report is somewhat misleading again in this respect. It can be seen in the visualisation submitted that the building itself sits very low in the landscape. The design of the building, timber cladding with a corrugated roof, is typical of agricultural buildings. Timber sheds are very common on farms. Any other material, such as brick or concrete block, would be used for a permanent building, but this is not a permanent building. The main group of farm buildings is down Green Lane. An unmade road is also a public bridleway and is well inside the Cutthorpe Conservation Area. We consider this to be a much better position than located right next to the farm because of the issues down there and the conflicts between walkers and horse riders that use Green Lane. The committee members will have noted on the file the numerous letters of support which far outweigh the small handful of negative comments. As Matthew already pointed out, the Parish Council support the application, stating that it enjoys strong local support, particularly given that there has not been a local shop for many years, which was highlighted in the Brampton Neighbourhood Plan, and the opportunity to purchase locally sourced produce from a local outlet is a sustainable benefit and would have a positive impact on reducing carbon emissions through decreased food miles. So if the planning system cannot support a local farm with such high levels of support from residents and the Parish Council,
30 seconds remain.
Then what either happened to the Localism Act? We respectfully ask the committee to approve this application today so that Lizzie and Matthew and the rest of the Wood family can secure the future of their farming enterprise in Cutthorpe. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any members have any questions about the points raised? Councillor Fawcett.
Chair, with your permission, just if you don't mind, Dominic, just want to refer back to one of the officers a moment. Dominic's touched on something where we saw the visual earlier of the farm shop, which is sort of grey and blue and yellow. Yet Dominic has pointed out, and it was in some of the photos in the pack, that it's going to be clad with timber, essentially. Can we just double check that point, that is, because there's contravening information there.
The card, yes.
Right, okay. Dominic, at the moment, obviously,
Can I just assure you that it's not going to be yellow and blue, and
yeah, just
that's a technical drawing.
Yeah,
and that there were in the drawing
obviously
submitted.
it's arrived in that state,
Yeah.
as I understand it.
Well, no, it's not even that colour. That's just a technical drawing.
Yeah.
In with the plans were the proper elevations showing the timber cladding, but unfortunately they haven't been shown in the presentation, which I also feel is a little bit misleading for councillors.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So at the moment, the dairy farms are struggling, no secret. Is that viable or not viable without this addition?
It is viable at the moment, but obviously the milk price fluctuates wildly, as our speakers have already pointed out. And we've got the next generation, our passionate speakers, the next generation of farmers, and they want to ensure that the farm continues to operate. And as they've already pointed out, diversification is the key, and to be able to sell their product directly to the end user.
Will the dairy products being sold in there be exclusively from their farm.
Definitely.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. If you'd like to retake your seat, thanks. The next speaker we have is David Catton, a supporter. You've got 3 minutes when you're ready, David. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Committee, good afternoon. I am, as you said, David Catton. I've lived in Cutthorpe for almost 25 years. On receiving the officer's report, a group of Cutthorpe residents met to discuss its contents. We concluded that in July, the Planning Department quickly concluded that the proposed location of the farm shop was an incursion into the Greenbelt, causing it harm in the terminology of the National Planning Policy Framework, so it must be rejected. In the ensuing 2 months, the appointed case officer trawled through the NPPF, the local plan, and the Brampton Parish neighbourhood plan, and the opposing comments to find examples of text that would justify a recommendation to reject the application. We worked from the opposite starting point to find evidence that justifies approval of the application. We've had but a few days since obtaining the officer's report to unravel it and the relevant documents. Yesterday, we submitted our case in a late representation, which I hope you have all taken the opportunity to read and digest. We are not skilled people with professional experience in extracting arguments from the rules and regulations relevant to planning decisions. Nevertheless, we've done our best, and my colleagues will now attempt to show that fair-minded judges should conclude that this application may be approved. In recent years, this council has approved 6 planning applications relating to farm shops located in the NED Greenbelt. These involve new build premises, extensions to or changes to the use of existing buildings, improvements to access, as well as provision of or extensions to parking, all for farm shops on the North East Derbyshire District Greenbelt. We've also found elsewhere in England planning approvals for developments on Greenbelt land for purposes that seem totally inappropriate. These were approved because the relevant planning authorities deemed in each case the benefits to their local society outweighed the harm to the Greenbelt expressed by opposers. Members of the committee, it is in your power to disagree with the officer's recommendations and approve this application. All we ask is that you listen to my colleagues as they attempt to demonstrate that there are provisions in the NPPF, the local plan and the neighbourhood plan, to justify your approval of this application.
Thank you. Does any members have any questions for the speaker on the points raised? No. Right, thank you. If you'd like to retake your seat. The next speaker is going to be joining us by Teams, and it's Andrew Hughes, another supporter.
Is Andrew Hughes there, Martin?
Sorry, Alan, can you repeat that?
Andrew Hughes, has Andrew Hughes arrived? Otherwise, it might be best, Chair, to just move to the next speaker and then see if he arrives in due course.
Right, we'll move on to the next speaker, which is Jane Johnston.
It's actually Tom Johnston.
Right, thank you. Definitely, it's definitely not.
On behalf of my wife who's working today. And so good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Tom Johnston, I'm a resident. My wife and I are resident in Cutthorpe and have been for about, I think, over 20 years as well. And I just wanted to pick up one of the key issues really is around this being on Greenbelt. I'm just picking up the comment in the officer's report. It says, however, it's not shown why the proposed facility cannot be located within the settlement or why a Greenbelt location is essential to provide this facility. In addition, in granting a planning consent, the local planning authority could not guarantee that the site would be used by other site owners for purposes differing from those set out by the applicant. Officers conclude that the provision of a shop in Cutthorpe would bring community benefits, but there's no overriding reason why a site within the Greenbelt is required to provide for it.
And I think your officer put up a diagram of Cutthorpe, and it is a long ribbon that goes around the road. And the settlement area actually covers those buildings that are in existence as they stand at the moment. Outside of that is all the green belt. And the challenge that brings is there is no area that is not already populated with houses or whatever that could be used for the site, which is why that site's been chosen. And I think it was either Andrew or Lizzie explained very clearly that the existing facility, the farm and the rest of it, is down quite a long road, which is quite difficult to get access to. So the point they've chosen is the best sort of location you could put a shop in Cutthorpe. And unfortunately it is on Greenbelt, but there is no area in the settlement where you could put the shop. That was the main point I think I really wanted to get across. The other point around while the local planning authority can't guarantee that the site will not be used by other site owners, and actually I think the inference there is you get scope creep, you get other people wanting to take on the Greenbelt. This is on the Woods farm. You know, they have absolute control of this, and there's no intention. I don't see any reason why. So the planning authority wouldn't be able to guarantee it, but there's no reason why the Woods family actually. There's no incentive for them to go outside of this and use the land for other areas. And I think really that was all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Do any members have any questions on the points raised? No, thank you. We'll move on to the next speaker, which is Andrew Wood, who is also a supporter of the scheme. Thank you, Andrew. You've got 3 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm actually the applicant's father and the landowner. I'm a dairy farmer, an endangered species, really. Over the past 2.5 years, the number of dairy farms in the UK has fallen from 10,000 to 7,500. We currently milk about 130 dairy cows, producing 1 million litres of milk a year, which at the moment is all taken to Droitwich to be processed and brought back to God knows, to the rest of the country, to wherever. And it's always seemed crazy to us that this milk is going all that distance to come away again. We're supposed to be going carbon neutral, aren't we? We're supposed to be net zero. That's the thing. And so when Elizabeth came forward with a proposal of what we were going to do, it made absolute sense to me that we could process the milk within a few meters of where it comes out of the cow. And then we could literally sell it in the village a few hundred meters up the lane. And it just made absolute perfect sense, to do that. We've got every year we finish about 80 or 90 beef animals off the farm, and again, they go to wherever, why can't they be sold through the shop? We grow grass and cereals on the farm. There's no reason why we can't grow other things. We have land swap with a neighbour where he grows potatoes on some of our land. There's no reason why that can't, all these things that can be done locally that people go everywhere to source. I mean, again, we've heard of how diversification is the way forward. Well, how are we supposed to diversify if we're not allowed to diversify? I mean, we understand the green belt, but you've got to remember that the farm itself falls within the conservation area and is in close proximity to listed buildings. And because of Green Lane and the farm, it's a busy working farm. We have 3 of us are full-time on the farm, and then there's 2 part-time employees. There's always something happening. To have cars coming down to a shop or whatever all the time it's not safe. Farm's got a terrible health and safety record. We don't need something to make that worse. We want to make it better. And what better way than to do that in a nice, safe environment right next to the road where people in the village can come, walk to, and not use the cars? It just seemed to me a no-brainer, really. And when Elizabeth first came up with the idea, I said to them, look, if you want to do it, we're all for it, but go to the community and see what they want. If they don't want it, forget it. And they went there, and I've just been so touched by the support of the local community. I just cannot believe it. The number of people who've commented today about wishing us well and how it goes on. There's, the number of applications, with hundreds of them, of people supporting it. And I'll just urge you to think again, if you'd refuse it, please talk to us. Let us help. Let's do this for the community. There's got to be a way around this. Please, whatever we do, I just ask that we try and get something sorted, because it is the least bit of green belt, if you like, the lowest. Where we're choosing to site it is the least impact on the green belt.
That's time, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does any members have any questions about the points raised? No. We'll move on to the next speaker, which I believe is going to be Carl Langley. Thank you, Carl. You've got 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. So when I first learned that Matthew and Lizzie wanted to open a farm shop to sell local farms produce, Michelle and I decided to look around at other farm shops to try and understand what was feasible and achievable. A number of these, when we came to look at them, were located in Greenbelt and on open countryside, which meant, for us, it made sense that that would possibly be a possibility. One particular note is a farm shop at Stretton, which is located away from the main farmstead development and is a similar size and appearance to what's being proposed in this instance. Looking at the approval for that development, it was interesting to notice that the planning committee cited paragraphs 83 and 84 of the National Planning Policy Framework, as this appears to be relevant in this case also. But it seems to have been omitted from the report provided by the planning officers on this occasion. As the planning officers may recognise, there is no available location within the current settlement development limits of Cutthorpe for the creation of a shop for the community. Within their report, the planning officer acknowledges the community benefits that such a shop would bring and also recognises the link with farm diversification. Whilst you may already be aware of the contents of paragraphs 83 and 84, I would just like to quote a specific sentence that was taken from the planning report for Stretton. The NPPF also states that sites to meet local business and community needs in rural areas may have to be found adjacent to or beyond existing settlements, and in locations that are not well served by public transport. In these circumstances, it is important to ensure that development is sensitive to its surroundings and does not have an unacceptable impact on local roads. As this development is intended to both be sensitive to surrounding area and will not impact the roads negatively, I would respectfully ask the committee to consider these points as well.
Thank you. Do any members have any questions about the points raised? Yeah, Councillor Rouse.
Thank you. Hello there, good afternoon. Have you ever actually visited the Stretton Farm Shop?
Yes, I have actually.
Yeah, so it's really not in Stretton, is it? It's on Newmarket Lane.
No, it's an open countryside.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, because obviously you've got the
Yeah.
main road, which is Stretton, because I live 5 minutes away. And that, I wondered if you actually been there to have a look.
Yes, of course I have, yeah. Yeah, I enjoyed the cake as well, just before you ask.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. No further questions. Thank you. You can retake your seat.
Thank you, Chairman.
The next speaker will be Roger Pendleton, which I believe is also a supporter of the schemes. Thank you. You've got 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the Council. I'm talking mainly about the quality of the view that has been raised. Just to say, the people of Cutthorpe living near the Institute enjoy fine, expansive views looking to the southeast over Chesterfield and beyond from an elevation of 170 metres. Because if you look at an OS map of the area, that precise point is 170 metres above sea level. The Cutthorpe Creamery proposal doesn't threaten these views any more than a growing sycamore tree would reduce the view, which does reduce the view from further up the road. The photo montage of the impact of the proposed cafe shows quite clearly that it is barely visible, lying behind the stone wall and at a lower elevation than the road, and besides being on wheels, it can be reorientated. A point on the stone walls are part of our cherished landscape, and we are grateful that Andrew Wood scrupulously maintains and reinstates these, even though it costs him around £10,000 per annum. In turn, it provides employment to local stonewallers. In conclusion, there is little to suggest that the quality of view from Cutthorpe are lessened by this proposal, and we should therefore approve it. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you. Any members have any questions about the points raised? No, thank you. If you'd like to retake your seat. And the final speaker we have on this is John Robinson. Thank you. You have 3 minutes when you're ready. Thanks.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, this application has a similarity to a legal case. There are arguments for and against. You are the jury to decide the matter of the strongest part. After the applicant's consultation with our councillor, Councillor Martin Thacker, he decided and requested it go to the committee so the matter could be considered thoroughly, not just the officer's decision. As councillors, you have other matters to consider. There's economic development, business, health, cleansing, community, not just whether some proposal is in the green belt. These days, all organisations, which include councils, are encouraged to be sustainable and diverse. This is exactly what this application is about. One of the biggest problems this country is facing at the moment is producing more of what we need within the country and also reducing the cost of what we produce. This is just a small step in this direction, and Andrew Wood has already made that point about the movement of milk. All the reasons why this application is an exception within the definitions the district's plan have been covered by the previous speaker. If you turn down this application, then I am assured that the parish council will apply for a neighbourhood development order in conjunction with the neighbourhood plan, which we believe will soon be accepted. As this order requires a referendum, judging by the present support basis, it will soon be put into practice. Planning is also about schemes which should benefit the community. The Brampton Neighbourhood Plan does that, as explained by the previous speakers. Over 65 members have supported this proposal with only 8 objections. 1 being anonymous, so doesn't count, and 2 from the same person, 1 being which is an addition. And 1 supports the idea and would use it, but it feels it's in the wrong place. This shows that the application has a large number in support
30
and
seconds
should
remaining.
be approved to meet the community's unit. 1 letter is particularly relevant, and I quote, "I care for my elderly mother in the village and it would be a huge boost to her mental health and well-being to have somewhere local to shop and socialise. I call on you as councillors to decide on what is the right decision to make, having heard all the positive reasons for approving the application." Thank you.
Thank you. Any members have any questions about the points raised? No. Thank you. If you'd like to retake your seat. Colleagues, you will now have the opportunity to put questions to the officer about this application. Do we have any questions for officers? Councillor Fawcett.
Excuse me. This planning permission is time limited at 3 years, is it not? And we have enforcement teams that can make sure that if it was approved, that they were complying with whatever motions we pass here today if we decided to. Is that correct?
A time limited permission, that's correct. And you've heard this afternoon that if the facility wasn't successful, it would be the intention to remove that. That's something you need to consider in your assessment, Chair. But you've also heard this afternoon that if the scheme is successful, it would be retained and continue. So I would ask members to be guarded in terms of that, because if you were to grant permission for a time limited 3-year period, you would normally be doing that to assess the impact of the development and whether after that you could provide another permission that would then continue that. So I think this afternoon you need to strip the application back to its basic elements, and you need to determine the application in accordance with the policies of your development plan. And you've heard a lot this afternoon about other issues, but the primary consideration you have is the site lies within the green belt, where you have very strong policies of restraint, unless very special circumstances outweigh that. And we've set out in the report as officers our assessment of that, but that needs to be where you start from, in my advice to you. If you feel that a temporary permission for 3 years outweighs any harm to the green belt that you identify, then of course you could give permission for 3 years. But I would advise members caution on that, Chair, because if the project was successful, I think you would be faced with an application to then retain the building in its current form.
On that point, sort of two things come to mind about key performance indicators there, about it doing what it says on the tin. If it was a 3-year time limit application, at what point would it have to come back here to be reassessed for any additional works, etc.?
If you were minded, bearing in mind what I've said about going through that process, if you were minded to grant a 3-year temporary permission, then you would expect an application to come back into the council for the removal of that condition that would otherwise time limit the permission prior to that 3 years expiring. That would be a matter for the applicant. And if that wasn't the case and the 3 years expire, if you granted permission for 3 years and that expired, then that would become a matter of the council following it up, as you say, through the enforcement process.
So as it stands, if this were to be passed, hypothetically speaking, within 3 years, everything would have to be removed anyway, if there was no application to extend it.
If that's the way that you would grant permission this afternoon, that's right. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for officers? Nope. Right then, thank you for that, officers. This is to the final part of the process, our discussion on what we have heard, what we think and what we want to decide. I would now like to open the floor for debate. Councillor Gare and then Councillor Fawcett. Christine, can you just put your mic?
Sorry about that. Well, that's all I wanted to say, really. I'm minded that we should really think about this. I understand the points about the green belt, but then we've got, diversification for farmers and a great public good.
Councillor Fawcett.
Food security is a serious concern in this country at the moment, and farming in itself is under threat, especially family farms. They're really struggling. And I think it's for people like ourselves to try and make them as viable as possible, because soon what we'll move to is a food system where we get a lot of food miles. It's not locally sourced and produced, when it could have been if we'd have had a can-do attitude to solutions such as this. The big issue here is encroachment on the green belt, but the green belt is there to protect land that would otherwise be built on unnecessarily. In this particular circumstance, it's quite clear that this is a temporary building and has a lot of is quite a viable proposal that would have positive impact locally, as well as the fact it's going to help a family keep farming in North East Derbyshire, which is extremely important. So, taking into account what we said about the 3 years, I would like to invite any contributions from other members or officers about what key performance indicators we could put in place to the applicant, that we can find a way of them being able to achieve planning today that would make sure it's viable but also equitable.
Adrian, if you'd like to come in.
The advice we give as planning officers, Chair, is based on the legal responsibilities that the local planning authority has to determine applications in accordance with a development plan unless material matters contend otherwise or outweigh that position. So in this instance, Jen, I'll come back to the point that Councillor Fawcett made in a second, if I may, but the starting point for you has to be whether or not the proposal lies in accordance with the policies of your development plan when read as a whole. And I come back, Chair, to the primary issue in your officer's opinion in this case is that the development is proposed in the Greenbelt where you have strong policies of restraint. And in this instance, the advice we're giving you as officers is that the proposal does not meet one of the exceptions to development in the Greenbelt. And so our conclusion that it is inappropriate development, and that is by definition harmful to the Greenbelt. In our assessment, Chair, we've then gone on in the report to assess the level of that harm, and we've concluded that there is both visual and spatial harm, and we're giving that significant weight in our assessment. And then we go on to discuss the other material matters that have been put forward as very special circumstances. And our conclusion is that they don't outweigh that. In terms of your assessment, you need to go through that same process. So I would urge members to go through that same process. Now, if you conclude that it's inappropriate development, then you come on to the very special circumstances that Councillor Fawcett and Councillor Gar have been talking about, Chair. And then you must consider whether they outweigh whatever level of harm you contend there is to the Greenbelt, and that's your conclusion. In terms of the point that Councillor Fawcett made, Chair, the assessment of whether the project is successful or not would not be a matter for yourselves. That is a matter for the parties. You need to consider the matter in terms of issues that you've talked about, diversification, assisting the farm, provision of a facility for local people. That is what you need to weigh in the balance. And you need to be sure that in weighing all that, any of those other circumstances are not just circumstances, they are very special circumstances. And therefore, we would normally, as officers, encourage you to put that in the context of not easily replicated elsewhere. So you need to balance all those things in the way that you come to your conclusion. If you were to conclude that they did outweigh the harm to the Greenbelt, if you conclude there is harm to the Greenbelt, then you could put a 3-year temporary permission on. That would normally be there to allow the applicant to show that their business has been successful. I would presume they would come back to you in 3 years' time with their balance sheet saying it's been successful, it's achievable, we've had this throughput, we've made this amount of money, and this is our business plan going forwards. And then you could assess then, if you wanted to assess the issue of viability going forward into that assessment, as whether you wanted to then grant a further permission, extending the 3 years in effect.
I was actually thinking more about the environmental impact and the assessment of that, because if milk is being moved down, I can't remember where the gentleman said, but a long way away, and that transport then is, the carbon that's being created. Whereas if it were possible for us today, if it's not already included, I don't recall it, where there was exclusive sale of dairy products from the farm only within that shop, that is already reducing food mileage and carbon impact. Thus, there is a greater environmental outcome by having that shop there than removing the land, as it presently is, and its impact on the environment being used for the growth of crops. So that's what I'm looking at there is, well, if that dairy product is being sold locally and it's not being transported all that way, that far outweighs growing, let's say, 1/3 of an acre's worth of grain there every year.
In circumstances elsewhere in the district, we have placed conditions on approvals for farm shops requiring the level of produce within those farm shops to be provided from X or within a radius of. We do find them difficult to enforce because we've all visited farm shops and the range of products often exceeds, as we've heard this afternoon, milk-related products or beef-related products or cereal-related products. They often exceed that. So from an enforceability point of view, we have found difficulty in ensuring that. But for example, you could condition that only produce grown or developed on the farm could be sold in the farm shop, but it does have those enforceability difficulties for us. And I've no concept, I'm afraid, I apologise, I've no concept on what 1 million litres of milk looks like or who it provides for. I've just no concept of that. So whether that could all be kept within the farm shop and avoid the trips to Droitwich, I don't know, but I've no concept of how that would work, or how 80 beef cattle translate to produce. So, but you could, if you were minded, having gone through all the other steps, the planning steps to want to condition that to achieve the reduction in the carbon footprint, and that was one of your very special reasons, then you could place those conditions on. But I do have that caveat that they are traditionally difficult to enforce.
Thank you for that, Adrian. Councillor Hancock.
Thanks, Chair. This is one of those applications I hate because your heart goes one way and your head goes another. In principle, I actually do support this, but what the officers say is 100% right. It doesn't meet any of the conditions for building in the green belt. The sad thing is, if they'd actually put the processing plant there, which would have had an agricultural need, we won't be having this discussion. Yeah, I mean, personally, I would love to support it and say, yeah, but I don't. It's a case, if we don't follow the policies, and I mean, looking at the neighbourhood plan, which has been referred to several times, and no, it's not enforced yet. First thing, ensure that any new development in the parish, whether it is new housing, conversion or existing buildings or other development, requires no intrusion into the existing green belt. And this is the problem, and often the problem with neighbourhood plans, because they put things in black and white, and then you have something that they then want to make an exception of. So yeah, we've got a lot of support from the village saying they want it, but we're also realistically having the village saying at the same time saying they don't want this to happen. And if we approve it and then we go with permanent, in 20 years' time, that could be a house there. And that thing's been given, so we just don't know that. So it's a hard one. I'd love to support it, but based on what we've got, it doesn't meet any of the criteria at all for building the green belt.
I'm in agreement with David on that. It is one of those that your heart goes with the supporting it, but unfortunately we've got to look at the framework that we're constrained by, both nationally and locally, and I think it makes it a very difficult decision. But on that grounds, I don't think it mitigates enough the intrusion into the green belt.
Sorry, speakers can't participate further after they've spoken and answered questions.
Right, have we got no more contributors to the debate? Having heard everything today and the officer recommendations before us, what is the view of the committee on the application? I am now opening the floor to motions. Yeah, you can.
Yeah, I would like to move officers' recommendations, please.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Right, on the floor, we've got to accept officer recommendations, so we're now going to take that to a roll call.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Cooper. Councillor Fawcett.
4.
Councillor Gurr.
4.
Councillor Hancock.
4.
Councillor Hartshorn.
4.
Councillor Jones.
4.
Councillor Lacey.
4.
Councillor Liggett.
4.
And Councillor Rouse.
4.
That's unanimous, Chair. The motion has passed.
Thank you. That's the debate over. If you can leave the chamber, please. Thank you. Thank you for your attendance, and thank you for all your comments.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, David. Right, if everyone's happy, I'll move straight on to the next application. So this is application NED 22/01042/AD Wingworth. Right, in line with the normal practice, I'm going to ask the planning to tell us about any late comments and showing any photos and plans of the site. I'll allow the officer again, members, unless you have any points of order that you feel cannot wait, could you please reserve these or any questions about the process until the end. So I'm now going to move you over to Graham Cooper, who's doing the last presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. We're just firing up the presentation now. So just bear with me a second. Thank you, Alice. Right then, so this is an application for advertisement consent for the installation of 4 signs on the parish rooms at Wingworth. 2 signs will be vertically installed and the other 2 positioned horizontally. Following concerns raised by the case officer and neighbouring residents, the original submitted scheme has been amended to remove any internal illumination from the proposed signage. 1 single late representation was reported yesterday. That was just offering some officer commentary around the scale of the proposed signage. There's been no third-party comments, and there are no technical reasons why this application should be refused. The main issues, as laid out in the officer reports, are the impact on the proposed advertisements on the character and appearance of the site and the surrounding street scene, the impact on public amenity and highway safety. Thank you, Alice. So this slide, this illustrates the application site shaded in orange. The application site sits within the settlement development limit for Wingworth, with open countryside to the west of the site, west of New Road. You've got detached residential properties to the northeast and south of the application site. We've also got an established equestrian development opposite the site, along with a recently constructed holiday cottage, but they're set at a lower level than the hedge line, which is on New Road. The land levels to the west fall away down into the valley. So this is the location plan, which has been submitted with the application. You can see the site edged in red, hopefully there. The plan illustrates more clearly the relationship between the site and the neighbouring properties. You can see the existing car park associated with the parish rooms, just off on a limb to the right-hand side there, and how close it is to the existing properties which surround it. Next slide, please. So this plan illustrates the position of the proposed signage. We've got 2 vertical signs that are proposed at points 6 and 8 on this plan. This is to the front and rear entrance points of the building. 2 horizontal signs will be positioned at points 1 and 5 on the plan, and these being at the side of the main entrance on New Road, and 1 on the north gable. Next, hang on a second. Next slide. Perfect. So this plan, this illustrates the design of the proposed vertical and horizontal signage. Just to be clear, the dimensions illustrated on this plan are for illustrative purposes only, and this is just to show the difference between the horizontal and vertical design of the signage. Next slide, please. So this plan is a more detailed plan, and it illustrates the exact dimensions and design of the signage. The lettering will be 1.85 meters in width and 0.4 meters height. The vertical design is just a 90-degree rotated version of what you can see here. So the plan shows that the signage will be constructed with internal lighting, but just to be clear, the units will not be switched on This plan also confirms the final dimensions as we've discussed. The applicant has confirmed that they will in the future explore illuminating the signage, but this will be in consultation with officers and neighbours, and I have advised that a new permission will be required to illuminate the signage. And just to make sure that that's clear, I've included a condition ensuring that the signage will not be illuminated in any way, included in the officer recommendation. And the next few slides are just a couple of photos taken from site that members will have seen yesterday at the virtual site visit. This is taken from New Road facing the north elevation of the parish rooms, and a horizontal sign will be included in the elevation that you can see there. This next slide is taken from the car park to the rear of the parish rooms, and a vertical sign will be included on the elevation next to the rear entrance, just to offer a bit of a way marking into the building. And the final slide, this is taken from New Road, and a vertical sign will be installed to the left of the door, entrance door, we can just about make out there. And a horizontal sign will be on the blank gable that you can see between the doors and the small window. And it just helps, waymark people into the building. And that concludes the presentation.
Thank you. As there are no speakers on this application, we will move straight to questions to the officers. Again, I would like to keep this part of the proceedings focused on getting clarity about any points you are not sure of. So I would be grateful if you could not move any motions at this stage. Do we have any questions for officers? Sorry, Councillor Lacey.
Yes, I'd like to ask the officer, are these actually going to be hardwired so they may possibly be accidentally switched on or left remote of any power supply?
So I'm advised that they will connect the signage up, but they won't be switched on. So, we could include a note maybe just to make it clear, the condition is there and it is enforceable. So if the lighting is put on by accident, then, and I think that if it is accidentally put on, that might be an interesting test to see what that harm is, because I know the parish rooms are looking at some form of illumination for this signage, but they want to work in conjunction with us and the residents, because there has been concerns about all the lighting on the site. But we have got a condition saying that it won't be illuminated, and that's all I can kind of secure for you today.
Yeah, I would like to think that it couldn't possibly be turned on. If they come back, then obviously that's a different question.
Any other questions for officers? No. Okay, thanks, colleagues. Having heard everything today and the officer recommendations before us, what is the view of the committee on this application? I am now opening the floor to motions. Oh, well, to debate, sorry. Councillor Cooper. I'm a bit with Tony on this one. I think we need to make sure that it can't be turned on. I think we need some condition in there, just to say, and then let them bring it back, and whether we can stipulate something later on that they can have so many lit up, or rather than I think 8 signs all lit up on one building is a bit excessive, to be honest. Yeah.
You can't really miss it either, can you?
No. No, it's not like the building doesn't stand out anyway, is it? Right, members, do we have a motion put forward for this application? Right, we're going with that. I'll second that. Do we need to do a roll call, or can we just go to a show of hands? I think we'll go for a show of hands.
Happy with that?
Yep. Just with the condition. Graham, if possible. Thanks.
A unanimous vote, members?
Yes.
Okay.
Right, that brings us to the end of all the decisions we have to make. Now call the planning officers to explain our next report, item 8, appeals lodged and determined.
Thank you, Chair. There's a good draft of appeal decisions that reporting this month, and I'm taking it that all members are receiving the appeal decisions, so that's a good thing. There are a few here, Chair, I would just like to make reference to. The first is the first.
Sorry, Chair. Do we want to invite Councillor Hancock back in? He probably doesn't know we're finished.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Not entirely sure he's still here, but we'll just go out and just check.
He's left his pen.
We're just on the appeals section, appeals lodged and determined. So we forgot you were outside.
Just I'm just going to reference first of all, Chair, the first appeal lodged at paragraph 1.2, which is a site that many members may be aware of, but it's the West Hadley Nursery. So there's an enforcement notice been served on the activities there, and that will be heard in due course. The second reference I did want to bring members' attention to, Chair, is at paragraphs 1.5, the 4 appeals there. They're all enforcement appeals, but they do go into some detail, the discussion that we've had this afternoon regarding Greenbelt and how the decisions of the inspectors have been reached in all of those 4 cases. They do make interesting reading, Chair, and particularly the appeal decision at Cartref also discusses issues around impact on the conservation area at Holmesfield, but it does have other applications elsewhere in the district, and also regarding the fallback position, which you'll often be faced with. So I would, if you haven't already, I would encourage you to have a look at all 4 of those and read through them. They do raise some very useful learning points in terms of decision making. Happy to take any questions, Chair, but they were just the points I was going to raise.
Thank you for that, Adrian. Any questions? No, right, thank you. Thank you, members. Do we agree to note the report? Just show of hands, yep, okay. I have no urgent business, so now declare the meeting closed. Thank you for your attendance.
Well, I see